Welcome to Ubu Dub, and it's been a long time no here, but we're back for a very special reason, which is that we have two new reissues coming out, St. Arkansas and Pennsylvania, and we call them reissues, but as you're going to hear from David Thomas, who's our one and only guest this week, that they are basically new albums. So let's get straight into it with the first track from Pennsylvania. Enjoy.
There's a diner out on Route 322 in western Pennsylvania. I spent my life there one afternoon. I can't get that stretch of road out of my head. I hear it when I'm taking a shower, reading the paper. I'd look up and see it across the valley. They tore down the starlighter down at the end of the road and built a big Days Inn that blocks the view. But I know that road's still there. I can feel it wherever I go, whatever I'm doing, and it knows that I'm still here, and it's waiting. We are abandoned. Liars own the words, and all the pictures and all the museums in the world are just a shell and peak game played by the clever people that broke the rules. Reality is defined by the needs of the media. History's rewritten faster than it can happen. Culture's a weapon that's used against us. Yeah. Culture's a swampland of superstition, ignorance, and abuse. Geography is a language that can't screw up. The land and what we add to it cannot lie. It's also like a mirror. Reflected we see ourselves, or we choose to turn away. Watch it now. Watch it. Watch it.
David, welcome.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, welcome.
First track is Woolly Bully.
Woolly Bully, yeah. That was pretty essential to the album. That was like one of my first ideas for it. Yeah.
And this album, you've totally remixed it in the pandemic, which we've been busy doing all sorts of things during the pandemic. And this is basically a shining light that's come out of it, because these albums sound completely different. What was your intention?
Well, I wanted to... Paribu's always made a difference between the studio work and the live work. Everybody always says, oh, you're so great live, and your studio albums are different. You know, well, yeah, the studio albums are always... We had the idea that, you know, they were to be listened to at home contemplatively over and over again, you know. The live stuff, you know, we pile a bunch of equipment on stage and take a few minutes to sound check, make sure everything's connected, and then bam, we're into it. So I wanted to sort of move the albums much more towards a live sound. Now, there are no new. So I took the multi-tracks and I remixed them from zero without any, you know, a lot of times discovering, some of the times discovering tracks, for instance, that we hadn't used originally, or that we had kind of buried originally, or whatever. But there's nothing. There are no new tracks. There are no overdubs or anything. It's just simply you take the thing from zero and you put it together with the sensibilities that I have here in 2021, with the updated technology that I have access to now, at great expense, personal expense to myself, and put them together again.
It must have been quite a bit of pressure back in the day when you were first doing this in the studio, because you had three new members, Robert and Michelle, who'd already been on Raygun Suitcase, and the introduction of Steve Melman, and coming back into the fold, Tom Herman.
Yep.
who hadn't played with you for around 20 years. What brought that decision about?
Well, Jimmy had to retire from the road. He was going to quit the band, and I said, Jimmy, you don't have to quit. Still do come in for the studio stuff. You'll be sort of a member of the band emeritus. We'll make a special category for you, and come in and for studio stuff and do what you feel up to. I mean, his health was failing pretty quickly, so I needed a guitar player, and I don't know, I thought of Tom for some reason. I don't know.
That was kind of a big risk. I mean, you've got this young, vital energy that's come in that are playing for a band that they've always loved. And then you've got somebody who was there from the beginning coming in, probably with preconceived ideas about how it's all going to go. Were there any clashes in the studio?
Oh, I'm sure there was the usual issues, but there weren't any particular clashes. I really am not one who allows for clashes. I don't, when we're working on something, we deal with it from ground zero, and if you want to bring in, I'm not saying he did, but if one wants to bring in preconceptions or memories from the past, it's meaningless to me. I'm not interested. The same reason why I'm not interested if you quit. At no point when somebody quits do I say, oh, why are you quitting? What's wrong? What can we do? No, I say, okay, well, thank you for your work. Goodbye. And that's it. It's part of the mythology of arrogance that's created around me, but I'll add to it. If you're in the band, I have your replacement already in mind. I'm 3 steps ahead of everybody else. I'm 3 steps ahead of you. I just thought, okay, if he wants to, I thought it would be a good idea. My thoughts are generally pretty damn good. If you look back over 40 years, I've made the right choices most of the time. Not all the time. There's some things I regret, but we won't get into that.
Let's have a listen to Sad Text.
One day I will be your man. One day I will be the best that you can do. Time will catch up to you. By lighting to how my world slows to a stop each night without you. One day with you I'll freeze me. One day I'll freeze my life where it is up to you.
So these lyrics, explain these lyrics, because you were still a relatively young man and they sound very tired and male.
What do you mean tired? No.
One day,
someday.
It was a prophecy then.
Yeah, well, it's maybe you don't get it because you're a female, but it's a very male concept.
Oh, I get it.
One day I will be your man.
Yeah.
One day I will be the best that you can do.
Yeah, look how that turned out. Another really interesting thing on this album is that yet again in the Perubu world, people don't really stick to just the instrument that they're known for, you know. You're playing organ on Woolly Bully, Tom's playing tack piano, Robert Wheeler's playing organ, Michelle Temple is playing organ and piano, and Jim Jones even plays the organ as well. So that's
all on Woolly Bully.
So I mean,
on Woolly Bully?
No, on the album.
I play organ on Woolly Bully.
Yeah. So I mean, what are we talking about? Organ? Are we talking about a synthesizer organ? Or?
No. Well, it depends. I don't know. I can't remember. Well, I don't. To tell you the truth, I don't remember what it was. It's something either they had around at Suma. I used to have a couple old organs. I don't know. What does it matter? No, and Suma had a huge Hammond B3. You know that. I bet you it was done on the B3.
When this album came out, Greil Marcus wrote incredibly enthusiastically about it. It was actually in his, I think it was number 2 of his favourite albums of 1998.
What do you mean number 2? I'm sure it's number 1.
I think some people say it's number 1. I can't actually find the listing, but he says, out of this comes an American language that means to tell a story no one can turn away from. And when I looked at MTV, it said Pennsylvania is not about stories. It's about half-heard tales where you fill in what you miss, where what you misheard is as important as what was heard. It's a catalogue of tall tales, fish stories and local legends, poorly remembered but vibrantly told.
Oh, that's amazingly complex for MTV.
So why does everybody say this is dark music when
I don't know, because that's what they, you know, that's one of those things that somebody wrote one time and the record company reprinted it and everybody, you know, I mean, I don't know if you know how journalists work, but they look for the first thing they can copy and they put that in, you know, and that's what they do. I mean, if musicians are scum, journalists are lower than scum.
Well, the funny thing is, the reviews that are sort of like 2 or 3 lines all call it dark. The reviews that are like a page and a half long all go into about how it's this folk tale.
There you go, and there you have the explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you listen to Urban Lifestyle, I mean, that's funky. That's really funky. Okay, it might be about a dark street in Soho or whatever the equivalent is in New York, but I mean, that's just full of life. And I wouldn't say it was dark. I'd say it was red light, if anything.
Yeah, well, you know, it was written about the parking lot at the plaza down in the red light district of Cleveland. You know, it was, you know, I had a girlfriend who used to park by Braille. You could always tell when she pulled into the parking lot because it was bam, damn it, bam, damn it.
Well, on this album as well, we have Fly's Eye, and you and Jimmy actually wrote that for Kylie Minogue. Tell us about
Fly's Eye. The A&R guy at Fontana, who was a huge Perubu fan, and I wished he wasn't so scared of us, you know, but because we were scared of him, you know, but he said, Kylie, this is a time when Nick Cave and stuff was right at the same time he wrote whatever he did for her, and he asked us to write a song for Kylie Minogue, and so Jimmy and I got there and sat down at his kitchen table and wrote Fly's Eye in about 10 minutes, and
10 minutes?
Oh, sure, yeah, you know, and you can tell from the rhymes it's 10 minutes, but I'm not sure that we ever sent it off to the A&R guy, because we sat there and listened to it and thought, there's no way in hell she's gonna do this track.
The driver of the car still your man, and the guy beside was your brother Bill. There was howling of the world from the top of the hill. There was howling of the world from the top of the hill. Tonight I can see them in your eyes, like solid in a dream. I can see them in your eyes, baby. You better come inside.
Let's use that.
I mean, to be honest, there's quite a few tracks on this that are pretty fast-paced. I mean, there's Wheelhouse as well, which is very fast-paced. and urban lifestyle, and it is
And the drumming on Wheelhouse is just astonishing from beginning to end. It's just like, what the hell is going on here?
So as you say, you started at zero, and did you go back to any of those separate tracks from the musicians and think, bloody hell, I didn't know he was doing that?
No,
That's
I knew what
awesome.
everybody was doing. It's just you make decisions based on the time, and the difference is now, for instance, I have the technology, I have time. When we were making the thing, there is no time. We're working on a shoestring budget that any other band would have given up years ago trying to work, and but we made up for it by just sheer determination and willpower and just delivering the goods, and so at the time, everything I've ever done since probably since Dub Housing, maybe Art of Walking, has been utterly under budget, and you deliver the goods now. You go with what you've got now, and that's all there is to it. Well, in 2021, I have the technology, and I have the time, and I have the inclination, and I have the desire, and I know that there's more in there. I've always wanted to just take the multi-tracks and give them to anybody who wants them and say, mix this, because Perubu exists on this level. Perubu is not one of these bands. It's not Guns N' Roses or U2 or any of these things. It's Perubu is unique. We am music. So.
One horse time has come your way. Have you ever felt like a one horse town has come your way? Have you ever felt like a one horse town came your way? Can you stay in a wheelhouse that gives you grinding? In a wheelhouse that
Yeah, okay.
I'm holding the new album up to the camera of Pennsylvania.
Well, don't move it around so much.
And that's the back. Did the title come before the music? Did you always want to make an album called Pennsylvania, or did the songs...
I don't know. Everything happens so quickly together. The idea of Pennsylvania, as I said at the time, I had a brilliant graphic that went with it. Pennsylvania is a space between where you are and where you want to be, and it's, 500 miles of wilderness as far as the highway it goes. When you cross Pennsylvania from Cleveland, you don't run into any towns, any cities, you don't run into anything sizable. It's wilderness from one stretch of it state to the next. And so, and it's 8 hours of blindly driving, of pain and tedium, so that's why I called it Pennsylvania.
The sticker on the...
No offense to any Pennsylvanians out there.
It says, the sticker on the front says, the songs are retold with genius hindsight. How do you feel about that? You think it's genius hindsight or just a 2021 breath into it?
What does it matter? If anytime I get to be called a genius, I'll take it.
What I find interesting is, as you say, it's got more of a live sound. You hear more of the nuts and bolts of every instrument that's playing on it, and the vocals are louder, which is interesting.
I decided I was going to turn up the vocals. I've never liked vocals, but and I hate singing. I hate to have to do it, but I thought, okay, all right, I'm gonna pull them up,
Well, that was pretty much of its
and
time.
Also, the other thing is that since then I've discovered the frequency in my vocal range that I really detest, and I've been able to notch it out. So I feel better about the vocals. I mean, there's this frequency at 112, 113 that I really cannot stand.
I can't imagine anybody else singing your songs, can you?
Well, we have already heard what's her name? Cat
Popper, but I mean, that was a completely different arrangement.
That's true. Well, but then that guy did Smoke the Barbecue. Very nice arrangement.
Yeah.
Very nice vocals.
But they're different songs. When you put a different vocalist on, they're different songs. And the backing vocals on Fly's Eye, you've again brought your backing vocals forward on it a lot more as well, so that they're not so harmonic. It's a very fresh take on it.
Well, what can I tell you? I mean, it's all what was originally there, and and it's a question of, maybe it's a question of genius hindsight. Maybe it's a question of the fact that I'm never satisfied with anything. Maybe it's a question of the fact that I hate my own voice, or that I'm embarrassed by being the singer, or any of these other things. But what does it matter? What do the reasons matter? What matters is that I have delivered, 2 fresh takes on the album that the longtime fans who are very familiar with the albums and love the albums have been startled by. So, and seemingly happy with. I don't know. But this is what it is.
Some of the lyrics on this album.
And also, I'd just like to point out, there's never an end point to Perubu. Everybody knows that Perubu is a journey, but what people don't quite appreciate is that the journey never ends so far.
I think these albums as well are perhaps you at your most gulp poetic. Poetic. I mean, some of the lyrics are really, because you've always been a brilliant lyricist, but these are far less oblique in their lyrics. Monday morning, in the hard-edged town, the form that the light takes is like a trickle down. Some things it can filter out softens the faces of the angry men who still walk around in the harvest night of a suitcase town. It's poetry.
Yeah, whatever.
Do you feel that your lyrics progressed and that this was the height of you writing the lyrics?
No, there's nothing that's the height. And yes, the way I write songs is varied over the years. There's endless variations in them.
Are you still learning?
I'm still I don't like repeating myself. So when it comes to the next album, if I start writing something and I think, oh God, no, this is just like something else, then I have no problem lifting lines from myself, but or repeating lines, but they're always repeated in a new context or in a revealing context or whatever. But I just don't like to repeat myself. That's the only thing that's driving me, is just to keep going.
Well, let's listen to Monday Morning.
It's like a trickle down. Some things it can filter out. Softens the faces of the angry men who still walk around. In the harvest night of a suitcase town. In the harvest night of a suitcase town. I feel the pace of change. I feel the face of change. I feel the pace of change. Something in the air. Taste of strange enough. Everybody must go. Everybody
you think Pennsylvania was your complete opposite to the industrial Cleveland? Is that why you fell in love with it so much?
Well, okay. Number one, Tenement Year was the last album about Cleveland. You know, Cloudland, Tenement Year was standing on the roof of a building downtown and looking out across the night skyline and knowing that you're leaving tomorrow morning. That tomorrow morning is the end. You know, so the rest of the Fontana albums are based on that. Cloudland is the journey. It's the beginning of the journey. You know, so when it got to Ray Gun Suitcase, again, I sort of dwelt on Cleveland as a memory, as the urban environment is a memory, as you're, you know, somewhere along that long journey, you know, something sparks, you know, you start to think about the past. You know, Pennsylvania was you know, the journey, the space between where you've left, which would be Cleveland, and where you're going to, which who the hell knows? I mean, Bay City for all I know. But that's where that comes from.
I'm going to read you some of the quotes that I found on the internet, because you had all the newspaper quotes, and we've quoted some on Ubu Projects about this album. But as I say, the Independent said sad, scary stuff, and that was pretty much all they said. It was about 3 lines. And then we've got, it's been many years since Perubu has delivered a record as sweeping in lyrical and musical scope as Pennsylvania, and it's been worth the wait. Another one says, easily their best of the 90s and among their best of all time. And MTV said it was the kind of album that, had it been a young band's debut, would have caused a much bigger fuss.
Well, you can say that about anybody whose albums 30 years later, I mean, you would assume.
They all seem to miss the point that later reviews take, that, you know, this wasn't the original band. They don't care.
No, they
as
don't
far as
care.
they're concerned, it's Perubu, and as they said, one of the best of all time.
Yeah.
How necessary do you think it was to find new people who understood, or did you find new people who had a different way of looking at things?
I didn't find anybody. You know, people find me. You know, that's the great power of Perubu. Nobody wants to be in Perubu for money, for stardom, or for the girls. People want to be in Perubu because it's Perubu and it does what it does, and they can work with me. You know, and I do what I do. And so that's number one. You know, I needed, you know, when it came time, when Michelle was a guitar player in her own band. She didn't play bass. I went to see her, and because I was thinking about people, and I said to her, you know, I'd really like you to play bass. And she said, I don't play bass. And I said, well, I'm sure you can, you know. And she became the bass player, you know. Melman, you know, was the drummer in one of her bands, you know, and he was the replacement for Scott Benedict, who had come in just for a weekend and recorded Ray Gun Suitcase. So I thought to myself, okay, you know, and I saw Melman play, and I thought, oh, no, I'm not sure. No, I never saw Melman play. I just said, do you want to be in the band? And he said, sure. You know, Robert Wheeler, again, you know, I knew that he played EML and that he had been in, you know, Home and Garden and this thing and that thing, but I didn't know anything about him particularly. I said, you want to be in the band? You know, if he wasn't the right person for Perubu, if she wasn't the right person for Perubu, they would have said no, or they would have hemmed and hawed. But no, each of them said, hell yeah, I want to be in Perubu. You know, Perubu selects its own musicians, you know. It's simple. I don't have to do much other than understand that this person is Perubu, you know, and they will slot. I know how this person, you know, Michelle didn't play bass. She's turned out to be a stunning bass player, you know, but her first instrument was lute, for goodness sakes, and her training was in Renaissance. I can't even remember the title of her doctor or of her thesis, what her degree was in. It's just so complex, but it has to do with the Renaissance, the effect, something about Renaissance music, and blah blah blah. She was on paper. She was the last person you would ask to play bass, but I knew she would be good. Same as I knew you'd be good as my manager. I knew it. I didn't have to, I didn't have to know anything. I understand. I can read people. I haven't made many mistakes on reading people. I've made a couple, which we won't get into, but I have a pretty good track record.
But I don't want to get deep, but I want to get deep.
Yeah.
Because, David Thomas, you've been doing it at this time for what, just over 20 years. And you've seen all of them go. All of them, really. Scott Krauss and Alan Ravenstein, Tony Maimone, all of them. You must have thought to yourself, okay, it's over.
No, why should I think it's over?
There must have been a moment where you doubted that you could keep Pere Ubu on this journey that you'd envisaged.
I have to tell you, there
70s.
was never a moment. There was never a moment that I was... Because maybe my perspective from the very beginning has been different from everybody else's perspective. My perspective from the very beginning, and the things that I said from the very beginning, was that after every album, the band is disbanded. You're out of the band. There is no band, and you might. And some people be, if you're the guitar player, then you've got dibs, unless there's something that's come up. You've got dibs on the position in the next band. For me, it's just been for me, it's been from the beginning, slot a person in, slot the right person in, and see where that group of people goes. And I think to myself, well, this is what I've got, and I need one of these. So who will add something and fit in to this group of people? And so I make that decision, and they're in. And I very rarely, the only time Pere Ubu has ever auditioned anybody was back in 1975. We had a kid came in and played with us for an evening, and in our little jam house out in Euclid, and I thought to myself, this didn't work out, and the experience of having to say to this person, this didn't work out, was too much trouble for me, too much angst. So from then on, I never auditioned anybody. Only half the time would I have ever seen them play. I never saw Melman play, but he was good enough for Michelle. It's good enough for me.
It's interesting, and I think you underestimate it. I mean, just this very morning I was going through CDs where you've collaborated with other people, and they're great songs, but they're not Pere Ubu songs. And yesterday I read an interview with Brian May of Queen, because he had gone into the studio with their new live lead singer Adam Lambert to do some writing during the pandemic, and he just says, we couldn't do it. We had great fun, but it wasn't Queen. So for you to bring in different people, you said to me a couple of weeks ago that your original intention of the band were for certain people to want to be in it. Tell people who are listening about that.
What do you mean?
You said Shakespeare and...
Oh, well, I always had the idea that Pere Ubu was going to be the sort of band that Herman Melville and William Faulkner and Raymond Chandler would have wanted to be in if they grew up during the rock and roll age. That was my ambition, so that's the sort of person I look for. I mean, I'm not going to find a Raymond Chandler, but I don't know. Who knows? That was my conception. That we were, you have to remember, this is back in mid 70s, okay? Ideas formulated during the early 70s when rock and roll was moving out of this sort of 60s juvenile fixation, or fixation with juvenility and adolescence and rebellion. Now remember, for us in the early 70s, as the post-hippie generation, we utterly scorned the alternative culture. I mean, it was a joke to us, full of hypocrites and no different from the establishment culture, but the establishment culture produced really cool TV, like Ed Stinn Chevrolet ads and Mudcat Grant appearing on Ed Stinn, and Goulardi and all this sort of stuff. So, I was convinced that rock and roll was on the verge of what I used to call a literate era, and lo and behold, other sort of literate bands began showing up at the same time, like Television, very, very much taking the evolution of rock seriously, and in the Residents, and there was other bands all around, who got wiped out by the copycat crap of punk and new wave. People don't, I keep saying these things, and nobody believes me, damn it, that punk was invented by Sony Corporation and Philips Corporation. It was totally backed by that. The new wave punk, absolute corporate as Coca-Cola, nonsense that was designed to wipe out the literate counter-revolution that was going on, or a literate evolution that was going on. And it succeeded.
Oh my God, I read something just yesterday. I wish I could remember who it was by, but it was basically saying that, the record companies saw this punk movement happening and they didn't like it, but they only knew the way to control it was to bring in their own bands and then get rid of the ones who had started it, and that's what they did.
Yeah. But I'm not questioning the motives. Number one, punk is a unique, let me say that again, uniquely British formulation. It had nothing to do with American. I mean, the notion of an American punk band was a joke, as you can readily see by the first American punk bands, which were jokes, Now, this is not to criticize the English groups, Buzzcocks and I don't even want to start naming them. We're Gang of Four, Buzzcocks, Sex Pistols, even, brilliant groups, brilliant, highly admirable groups. But that's speaking of the whole punk thing in the terms of an English social political movement that was stripped of everything and neutered by record companies and disappeared, except for the juvenile, surface appearance of things, which just harken back to the 60s. Oh, rock's all about teenage rebellion.
Right.
Sorry.
That's not for the kid. I'll edit that out. I'll go bleep, bleep. We're going to end with Drive. So tell us what driving in America means to you, because it's not just a physical act, it's an emotional act. It's a
spiritual journey. What does it mean? Well, there's, first of all, you would have to put it in the context of that song I just did the radio edit. What was that called?
The Radio Will Set You Free.
Yeah, the radio.
It's going to be called The Radio Will Set You Free, but it's from the song
Dark. Set You Free. Yeah, which used to be called Dark. So that's sort of the background of it. I mean, if you listen to that song, that song was written to explain Drive. What does it mean? The land, geography is a mirror. I've maintained this for decades, and that you see yourself reflected in that mirror
Well, you're quoting Wooly Bully there. Geography is a language they can't screw up.
That's right.
The land and what we add to it cannot lie.
That's right. Well, that's, and it's a mirror. You can choose to see, or you can choose to look away. Many people choose to look away. I don't. I study the mirror, because that's telling me about myself, the history of my family, the history of my culture. It's telling me about my future. It's revealing, ultimately revealing.
Drive to the sun, past the brittle bones of a moonlight world. It's a big country, and a sun-starred land, and the wind howls through the winter of lies.
It's a long way back down a road that everybody knows.
It's empty now, and my eyes are framed in the rear view. Does a desperation show? Drive to the sun, he said, through a look that looks from far away.
We've trailed our dreams behind us for days,
Like paper shredded by the force of our passing.
it's a lonely road when tomorrow
It's got no home yesterday.
all the day goes rushing west.
The thing that's so near was catching my throat, and I can't explain.
there you go, people. That is the podcast for Pennsylvania, and it's being released on the 10th of September. And we are very, very excited that on the 10th of September, Perubu will be playing it live. Some songs from Pennsylvania and Arkansas on our own live stream. Not quite sure where that's going to be yet. It'll either be on our Patreon channel or it may be on Bandcamp, but we will let you know. And we will see you on the next podcast, which will be all about St. Arkansas.
Oh, I thought this was supposed to be about St. Arkansas.
This one was Pennsylvania.
Oh, all right. Okay, well, bye.
Bye.
Please.